friends. Welcome to the metal shop. Today, we're doing something a little bit different in that we are actually working on some metal. This is an old wood stove that I got, and this was actually given to me years ago by my stepfather, who's since passed away, and sat in his garage for years, and he'd always told me, just get that thing out of here, you can have it, and I finally found a need for it here in the metal shop. I'm going to get some heat here in the winter. But time has not been so kind to this wood stove, and I actually forgot where my stepfather used this until I went to clean it out, and then I remembered. He had it in his shop. His shop was a wood shop. He built a post and beam house that we grew up in, and let me show you what I found because it's kind of interesting. He burned a lot of construction wood, kiln dried construction framing wood with nails in it. And he's been passed away for a few years now, quite a few years, but I actually was cursing him. I was trying to vacuum up with the old shop vac here, and I was getting all kinds of nails and clogging up. This piece of wood was actually buried in ash at the bottom. So this thing survived fires on top of it in this condition, just because it was completely covered in ash. This thing was completely intact. I kid you not. But look at these nails. And I had to use a magnet to pick the nails up out of the shop vac. And when I went to dump it, some still got in there, so I used this. And I also found that he'd had tiny little brads and like steel wool in there. And I got steel splinters and oh my goodness. Anyway, I digress. So we're working on restoring this old wood stove, and there's some good videos out there on how to do this. It's not terribly difficult. I'm lucky in that this wood stove has tons of flat surfaces, as you saw me getting this one with the vibrating sander. So I could get this surface, I can get this surface, that one, and a lot, probably 85% of this thing I can get with that big sander with some coarse grit on it to remove the rust. And it's just surface rust. There were some areas here where it got a little worse for the wear that needed some more attention. So I went after those with, I'm gonna continue with the wire brush and actually using the hammer, the claw part of the hammer like a pick to break off those big flakes of rust. You have to break off those big loose flakes of rust. Otherwise, moisture and everything, the ambient air, if it's humid, can get in behind it and cause the rust. So you have to clean that out. Even though you feel like you're removing all this metal, you're really not. When you're starting with something here that's, a 1/4 inch thick, removing those little flakes really is not a big deal. This thing was kind of neat. I'm not even sure what this is. There's a spring in here. So obviously what happens, and what's missing is, and I have it over here, there's a chain, like one of these pull chains like you have for a lamp, hooked to this. And what I believe would happen is when it gets hot, this spring is going to contract and it's going to pull this door up. And maybe it lets heat out or something, almost like a vent, like in your floor or something. I'm not really sure exactly how that works. So, and inside here, and I'm not sure what brand this is. It says home warmer. And it's got a picture of the old man in the mountain here, good old New Hampshire wood stove, I assume made in New Hampshire. But there, it's tough to see, but this was all full of the ash and the nails, and that is where that block of wood was buried. And stand by for 1 second here. I have my little light here. There, right over there, you can see that channel for that weird heating apparatus. Inside's in good shape. No problems there. It did have these weird panels hanging. That needs a little bit of grease. Has these panels that free hang on hooks. This one's the back. These are the sides. They kind of hang and they kind of swing inside the stove there. So anyway, I'm going to attack it with the vibrating sander here. I also have the good old Multi-Max that I'm using with some coarse grit. I can get to, I can probably get to close to 95% with those two tools. And then of course, we'll go to hand sanding if I need. I'm gonna hit Some of it with good old high heat paint, probably this bottom platform, and the underside underside's in pretty good shape. There's a couple spots like this where I had to tick off the rust, actually right in this area. So I'm gonna paint, just high heat paint the underside, this platform here, possibly these moving parts will get painted. Everything else is getting treated with stove polish paste. And this is stove black. This is like a petroleum product, and it really kind of seeps into the metal, the iron, and protects it and seasons and treats it. And once you heat it up, it really kind of bakes in. Now I've seen other guys use liquids, and liquids to me seem pretty messy. I bought this stuff at the local home center because that's what they had, and I did not want the liquid. And I checked it out on Amazon after the fact, and it gets rave reviews, and it's definitely gonna be much easier to apply than the liquid stuff. So I'm gonna continue sanding this thing up, and then I'm gonna clean it real good, and then you can join me back when it's time to apply a little bit of high heat paint and stove polish and paste. Jeez, look at that pile of nails. All right, my friends, see you soon. Right, so we've got the top here sanded down satisfactorily. I'm happy with the way that turned out. So what I'm going to do is, and I mentioned this last time, I'm going to use a little brake clean. Sorry, this is carbon choke cleaner. Brake clean, whatever, same difference. I like to use this because it will evaporate. I'm just going to demonstrate here on the top. I'm not going to do the whole thing or do a time lapse or anything like that. So we've already talked about, we're removing the just the surface rust from this. See how quickly that evaporates? And it'll just get this powder off for when we apply the stove black, the treatment there. You can either way spray it on the rag, you can spray it right on that itself. Spraying it on actually seems to work maybe a little bit better. And quite honestly, I think if you had a little bit of dust left on there, from the rust, I don't really know how much of a huge issue that would really be. I've seen guys use water to clean this off and then heat it up. Not going to do that. I'm just going to give it a good clean. That ought to be sufficient right there. And honestly, I'm going to use the same nasty dirty rag here to apply some of this stove black paste. Imperial Pole and Pate. Stove polish paste, sorry. Obviously this stuff is made in Canada. Canadians know a lot about heat. It's cold up there. Good place to buy snowblower, snowmobile, basically anything like that. Canadians know what they're doing. And this is like shoe polish, kinda. And they say if this stuff gets a little too dry, you can use a little bit of water to moisten it up. I actually went through and opened these at the hardware store and picked the two that I felt looked the least dry. Because the first one I picked off the shelf, I pulled it, I opened it, and it looked super dry and cracked. I bypassed that one. And now this stuff you use on places that you're not going to touch. I mean, eventually once you heat this a couple of times, you know, it's going to burn off, smoke maybe just a little bit, but you're not, I mean, you will get black on your hands if you touch this. Even on a seasoned stove, it's still going to come off a little bit. I have 2 cans of this. Honestly, I'm not sure if that's going to be enough. It seems like I'm using quite a bit here. It's really soaking it in good. Trying to get in. This has got regular slotted screws holding this top on. Really trying to get in those slots. And they say you can buff it after. I just want to make sure that we get a good uniform appearance. And none of it's, you know, too built up. I mean, wow, you can really see. I mean, this looks brand new. I mean, it really, see, you can see some of the strokes in there. So you'd want to kind of buff it if you cared. Starting at one end, moving back and forth to give it, you know, more uniform appearance. So now all I have to do is the rest of the stove. And I'm going to paint, like I said, I'm going to use high heat paint on that kind of that bottom tray around that lip. I'm going to flip it over and get the underside because it is got some rust, good surface rust that I chipped off of there, you know, with a hammer and the wire brush and everything else on the underside. So next time you folks come back, we'll have this thing completely done and ready for viewing. Awesome. Right, so, sorry, shooting this left-handed. Got the thing all coated. You can still see a couple spots that are kind of wet. I found you put it on pretty heavy, kind of soaks in, and then you can kind of buff it if any spots are kind of raised up there. You know, the heavier than the lighter. And it looks like, now that I see this in better light, that grate right there, I have to get that a little better in those holes. So I used a toothbrush. There's so many, sorry, it's a little dark in here. So many nooks and crannies, and there's the rag right there. So many nooks and crannies, I had to use the toothbrush there. I wanted to show you guys this. This was pretty funny. So when I got done with the rag, went to get a toothbrush, I was like, I mean, this came off the glove, and right off my pointer finger. And I was like, how did it come off? Where did this come from? The glove is still intact. That is my finger right there. Can you see the fingerprint? So yeah, the thumb and the finger are black. Nice. Nice. Also, I inserted the video of me vacuuming using the brush on a vacuum cleaner. That's cool. I did do that first. I went over the whole thing with the brush and the vacuum cleaner to get rid of the dust. Then I used the carbon choke cleaner or brake cleaner, whatever, you know, just to get it really clean. Then we applied the stove black. So I'm gonna check it on a day or two and see. I'll probably get a second coat, maybe get a little buff, see what happens. I'm gonna drag the thing back outside to fire it up. I'll put a fire in it and let it burn outside and degas and everything else. I'm very, very happy with how this came out, and hopefully it'll provide me some good heat in the metal shop this winter. So as all my friends, I thank you for watching. I truly appreciate your support, and please leave a comment. I appreciate all the comments, even if they're critical, as long as they're, you know, constructive and not just hateful. I try and respond to every comment still. Please give me a subscribe, give me a share with your friends, and again, I truly appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, my friends. Take care. Bye-bye.